So in this video, I'll go through the various topics that we can potentially vote on. These readings are possible readings, but they're not set in stone. It will depend on what topics we vote on and the schedule and things like that. So mostly think about it as voting on topics rather than voting on these specific readings for each topic. As we go through the topics, you'll see some of the topics have sort of subtopics. These are combinations of two topics. So for instance, if we vote for killer robots and for trust, maybe we'll also read some stuff on killer robots and trust that kind of combine those topics. So first, AI agency and responsibility. So this is the idea of giving AI agency and then potentially holding it responsible. We saw this a little bit in the second reading in the course, I think Shevlin et al. And so is it a good idea to give agency to AI? If we do, would that make them responsible for things, or would humans be responsible for making AI even if the AI were agents? So how does this work? What do we think? AI moral patience. Again, this came up in Shevlin. So should we make AI into moral patients, the kind of things that have moral rights, the kind of things that we have to treat in certain ways? Would this be a good idea? Is it possible to do it? If it's possible, should we not? AI governance. This is kind of the like regulating AI in certain sorts of ways. So how should we sort of make our, how should we structure government with respect to what AI does or how AI exists? What does governance look like when AI is involved? Algorithm bias. So this is about how algorithms, which show up in like lots of AI contexts, how these things can be biased and what it means for them to be biased. Algorithm fairness is very similar, but basically it's the question of assuming you don't want your algorithms to be biased, how do you ensure that they're fair? What does that even look like? What does it mean to have a fair algorithm? What counts as fair, and how do you program that into an algorithm? Then algorithm values is again kind of similar. It's about how, like, what is it for algorithms to kind of include values in them or to encode values in them. So when you set up an algorithm in a certain way, does that already bring along certain sorts of values or not? And if it does, how does that work? Autonomous vehicles, cars that drive themselves. There's lots of ethical issues related to that. Should they exist? And if they should, how should they function? Black boxes. So this has come up in class once or twice at least. And so the thought is some AI, it's designed in a way that we kind of don't really know how it's coming to its decisions. So like, especially for like evolutionarily designed AI, you tell it, go off and figure out how to do this thing. And eventually it starts spitting out what seem like the right answers, but you don't know how it's coming to these conclusions. And so some people worry about having AI like that and what we should do about AI like that. Criminal law is pretty straightforward. So how does AI and the criminal law intersect, or how should they intersect? How should we use artificial intelligence in criminal law, if at all? Human responsibility for AI. So this comes up a little bit in the agency and responsibility stuff, but this is like in particular, if AI goes and does something, to what extent is that on us? To what extent is that on the creator or the user or whatever? Like, how do we understand these kinds of questions? How do we deal with these kinds of questions? How do we hold people accountable? Should we hold people accountable? Killer robots. So right now there are, I don't know, but there's probably autonomous drones. So they fly around and then they shoot missiles at things. I think they're not fully autonomous. They sort of ask before they fire a missile. But we're not very far off from drones that just fly around and fire missiles. And it doesn't have to be drones. You can have robots that walk around which have guns on them and then shoot people. So, autonomous robots that are shooting missiles or bullets at people. That's a very ethically fraught issue. So, we can talk about the ethical issues related to killer robots. Medical AI. So this is one area where AI is being used quite a bit that is very like ethically interesting. So AI being used to, for instance, diagnose illnesses or things like this. There's lots of questions about ethically, is this good or bad, and how should we understand it? Moral robots. So this is the broad question of like how do you program morality into a robot, or can you program morality into AI? We talked a bit about this, I think, in Shevlin, and so we could go more deeply into that. Trust. So there's this question: uh, what is it to trust artificial intelligence, or was it to trust robots? Like, can robots be trustworthy? Can AI be trustworthy in the way that humans can be trustworthy? What does AI have to be like in order to be trustworthy? We're letting AI do all sorts of things in our lives. Is that a kind of trust, and how should we feel about this? And then finally, this has come up in class before: value alignment. How do we make sure, if we make sure, how do we make sure that AI is serving us, so to speak, that it's doing things that we want it to do, that it's not going to harm us, that's going to be sort of aligned with our values rather than off doing, bad stuff, destroying the world, things like this.